Well, hello everyone. My name is Jay Berkowitz. I'm here with Chris Mullins, and welcome to this month's webinar. Let me just share my screen and we'll tell you what we're going to be talking about today. I believe you all can see now. Today we're going to be talking about intake conversion strategies for law firms, but most of what we're sharing would be relevant if you're a doctor, an accountant, any professional services, and frankly, answering the phone is so important for every business. You'll learn a lot, especially with my guest, Chris Mullins, today. More about Chris in a minute. I'm just going to give you kind of a couple headlines, take you through our agenda for today, and then we'll get right to Chris. So we are going to cover the top intake and conversion strategies. Of course, that's the whole premise of today. We're going to tell you about the 5-step relationship sales conversion script, and that's Chris's expertise. And then Chris is going to play a live call, a recorded live call that came into a law firm, and she's going to walk through what they did well, what they should have done better, and how this relates to the 5-step relationship sales conversion script. And then we'll be happy to take some questions from you, the attendees. So without further ado, why is this so important? And it's become even more important. And I've been telling the story of the red phone that was in the Ronald Reagan White House. And I don't know if it's a true story. I guess it is. It's one of those urban myths, if you will. But there was a red phone right on Ronald Reagan's desk. And when the Kremlin called in the middle of the Cold War, the White House immediately picked up the phone. You know, it was a hotline. I'm sure we got some hotline situations today in the White House as well. So the red phone is significant because it means answer the phone immediately. This is mission critical. And today, with your Google business, with your intake business, you are in a red phone scenario. And the reason, the first reason, is the Google local service ads. And if you haven't seen my entire webinar about this topic, please feel free to go back and watch it. You can find all of our webinars on our website, on our YouTube channel. But the local service ads, this new section called Google Screened, where you get the green check mark approved by Google. Not everybody knows exactly what it means, but what I'm going to share with you from a business perspective, it means when you get one of these leads, you have to answer the phone immediately. Because the local service ad platform, the back end on Google, is tracking how quickly you answer the phone, and mission critical. If you miss a phone call, it's going to hurt you significantly in the algorithm. And what I mean by that is there's probably hundreds of lawyers approved in my area for the Google Screen program for a search for personal injury attorney near me. And these 3 are in the top position because they've checked off a lot of boxes in what we call the secret algorithm. But the first and foremost thing is you have to answer the phone. You have to answer the phone within 15 seconds. You have to disposition the calls after you answer the phone. You can't miss any phone calls. And you should have 24/7 services. You see all these guys in the top 3 are open 24/7, meaning they're answering the phone 24/7. So here's a quick peek into the back end of the Google Local Service Ads program. And you see all these calls are precisely tracked. We know how many calls we got and how many we dispositioned as a good call and an archive call, a good lead and a bad lead in the LSAs. But the important thing here is that every single one of these leads, we can click on this lead, we can see when it came in, we can play the recording, and think of it from Google's perspective. Google's recording all these calls, they're tracking how long it takes you to answer the call, and they're hitting you with a negative in the algorithm if you ever miss answering a phone call. Because let's go back to that Google search. If Google puts you on the top of the page and gives you one of these pay per lead, so these are pay per lead initiatives. It's not like pay per click where they're just clicking over to your website. Google's literally charging you per lead, and they want to send the lead to someone who's going to answer the phone, pay for the lead, and not reject the lead, and they're going to answer the phone quickly, and they're going to do a good job with the customer. They're going to book an appointment. Essentially, they're going to sign them up for a case. So suffice to say, when we say the red phone's ringing today, it's critical that you answer the phone. It's critical that you answer the phone quickly. And it's critical that you have, almost like a cross-functional team that's attuned to answering your Google leads and answering your Google calls. Now, if we stretch out a phone, this is an example of what you'd see if you scroll down a little bit. Here's what it looks like when you search personal injury lawyer near me on your mobile phone. And we see there's only 2, there's not 3 results on a mobile phone. And we see this extremely prominent call button right here on the phone. Now, just below the Google screen is 1 or 2 or 3 ads. Google will change it up. In this search, they're showing 1 ad. And then the Google Maps. And if we scroll down below, we'd see 3 Google Maps results. Now, as I mentioned, Google's algorithm is tracking how quickly you answer the phone. Now, everything I've seen, and I've been doing this, 10 Golden Rules has been around for 19 years. Our 19th anniversary is coming up on 10/10. And every time Google's made a change in one area of one of their properties, it translates and correlates onto the other property. So for example, when Google bought YouTube and YouTube videos started being search engine optimized, and we started search engine optimizing Google videos, creating videos around content about law firms and putting the name of the video and putting the title of the video and search engine optimizing that content. When we had a focus on Google video on YouTube, that translated into SEO success on the website. And so I would argue that that's been the case for every Google property. So now that they have local service ads, that they're recording the calls, that they're tracking how quickly you answer, and they're penalizing you for not answering the calls, I would suggest that Google's tracking exactly the same way if you answer the phone on a Google Maps call, if you answer the phone on a Google pay-per-click call, and if you answer the phone when someone finds you in SEO, search engine optimization, right? The 10 results further down the page, the free or organic or SEO. So my premise here is that when the red phone rings, you've got to answer the phone, because we know for sure, Google's told us in no uncertain terms, if you miss calls, if you don't answer the phone quickly within 15 seconds, you're not going to be showing up here for very long or at all. And you're not going to get your piece of the pie in terms of showing up in your market. So I'm extending that to say you've also got to answer the phone when someone calls from Maps, pay-per-click, or SEO. Okay, mission critical, answering the phone, getting to those calls quickly, having, if you need to rebuild your team, like if you have one receptionist and he or she takes a lunch break and you might not answer the phone very well over lunch because it just goes to a ringer and people ignore it, that's mission critical. If you're not answering the phone 24/7 after hours, okay, I think I've made the point here.
Yeah.
The red phone's ringing, you got to answer the phone. Now, the second piece of it is you want phone calls more than you want form fills or chats. So here's our client Law Tigers, and the right position for the phone number is in the top right portion of a website. Why is that the right position? Well, it's just become the standard or the constant or what we're used to from a UI UX usability and website design standpoint. So as a consumer, we generally know we should be able to find the contact information in the top right portion. Now, I think I've made my case. We want phone calls, right? Now, we also we'll take a chat, but the reason why we want phone calls, here's the back end for one of our clients. And this client got 177 phone calls in February. 44 of those were retained, were signed as clients. That's a 25% conversion rate. Our average is 24% of the phone calls converted to clients. Now, chats weren't bad. Remember, I said we also want chats. They came in at 9%. And form fills converted. We had 58 web forms. Only 3 were signed as clients. They converted at 5%. Now, the main reason for that is that if somebody calls, we get them on the phone, we give them confidence, and Chris is going to teach you how to do that in a minute. We give them confidence that we can help them with their issue, with their car accident, with their insurance company, with all their requirements. We convince them we're the right person for the job. We're going to get the job. We're going to sign them up. And typically that rate is much higher on the phone than through chats or forums. And it's just human nature. It's just common sense, right? If somebody fills out a form and you contact them an hour later or the next day, there's a very good chance that they hit the back button after they filled out your form and they contacted a couple other law firms. We know that the vast majority of people are going to talk to 2 or 3 or 4 different vendors in every field, but in particular in single incident law, right? So they're going to talk to someone else, and they might call them if their website's optimized for phone calls, or if they clicked on the Google screen or the maps and called them and they filled out your form. You might call them 5 minutes later and they're on the phone with the other law firm. Guess what? That law firm, if they're doing their job, they're going to sign them up through electronic signature, and they're never going to call you back. So we want to optimize all of our campaigns. We want our pay-per-click campaigns coming through on click to call. We want that big phone optimized for our LSAs, for our maps, for our pay-per-click, and we want to orient our campaigns toward phone calls because phone calls convert at a much higher rate. We want our website optimized for phone calls. So without further ado, I think I've made my case here. Intake and conversion is mission critical today in converting opportunities for law firms. And our job at 10 Golden Rules, we're a digital marketing agency, is to send the leads to the law firm. Your job is to convert those opportunities into paying clients. And we're so passionate about improving your intake because we want a higher percentage of the leads converting, so you get more business and you think we're doing a better job. So the purpose of being here today is to help teach law firms with one of the best professionals in the world that I know, and that's Chris Mullins. And let me tell you a little bit about Chris. She started her phone sales career at 19 years of age, and by 20, she was #1 in the company. Didn't surprise me at all, Chris. She's the host of the Lawyers Tell All podcast, which I've been a guest on. Thank you so much. And she's an author of this book, Law Firm Conversions, the founder and the CEO of Intake Academy. And with that, I'm happy to introduce my friend, Chris Mullins. Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Tell us one additional interesting fact about you.
Let's see. Well, I've done a 30-mile ultra marathon in one day. And
oh my goodness, that's insane.
But even better than that, I've done a triathlon when it was canceled. So triathlon was, a big race and everything, but there was a hurricane, so they canceled it, and there was no way I was going to do all that training and not do it. So I did it in the hurricane by myself.
Oh my goodness. Where was the location?
New Hampshire, Peterborough, New Hampshire.
So as you see, Chris is a super passionate all-star, and today she's going to translate that passion to teaching us about intake and conversion strategies. And Chris, you were going to be so kind as to introduce me.
Yes. Okay. So we have Jay Berkowitz, founder of 10 Golden Rules, author of 5 books, 2 bestsellers, plus internet marketing for law firms, CMO director of marketing, Sprint, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Moniker Edits, if I'm pronouncing it right. He's a tennis player and retired hockey goalie. Wow. We need to see a picture of that. That's amazing. So Jay Berkowitz.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, here's the new book coming out later this month called Advanced Internet Marketing for Law Firms. Awesome. All right. So what I'm going to do, Chris, is I'm going to stop sharing. And you're going to take us through the 5 strategies. So you should be able to go now.
Okay. Give me a moment. And let's see where we are here.
While Chris is getting set up, we can see your chats and Q&As. So if you want to ask a question, please get it into the chat and we'll take the questions at the end. But if you have an idea, definitely feel free to put it in.
Okay, we're ready. All right, well, let me begin by saying, wow, holy, holy cow, what Jay was saying about the red phone. Wow, that's really cool. You've got 15 seconds and Google is monitoring it. I mean, that's amazing. Talk about accountability. I love it. So everybody should get a red phone, have like either real red phones for everybody, which would be amazing, but at least, fake red phones on everybody's desk. So it's like a psychological trigger, a visual reminder. And that is like amazing. So awesome. Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to review with you how to use what I call the 5-step relationship sales conversion script. I'm basically giving you the script and I'm going to go over each step. And then after that, I'm going to play the call recording that Jay was talking about. Okay. So let's see. So step one, it's called the introduce step. It's the same idea as the greeting, but I call it the introduce step. And it's the very beginning of your call. So whether it's the receptionist or the intake specialist, depending on how your calls are, organized in your firm, it doesn't matter. You want to welcome them to the firm. So all you need to do is just say, welcome to Chris Mullins Law Firm. This is Mary speaking. How can I help you? And what you want to notice is I had a big voice and a big smile in my voice. And I didn't sound like I wasn't happy. I sounded like I'm ready for you. I sounded like I like my job and I'm happy at my job. And that's what you want. One of the things I want to mention about the word welcome is it's an important word. One reason, because the prospective client that's calling you, they've been thinking about calling you for quite some time now, but something happened now, today, in their world that made them say, okay, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. I need to call. And so when they finally call you, they're kind of like hyper responsive. And when they finally call you, one of the things you want to do is you want to blow them away with your greeting using the introduce step. We're all consumers and we all have experiences with businesses out there. And when we call them, the experience isn't really great, right? At the very, very beginning, from the moment you say hello, it's just not great. So the prospect is also a consumer and they have those experiences in their mind. And you want to kind of get rid of that for them. They're assuming that when they call you, it's not going to be a good experience. One, they don't really like law firms and lawyers. They don't trust them. And so you've got to change that from the very moment you say hello. But also just because of their experiences. So when you say, welcome to Chris Mullins Law Firm, this is Mary speaking. How can I help you? They don't expect it. They're shocked for all those different reasons. So give them something to be excited about and to feel good about, because they're not feeling great right about now. So you do the welcome. And then the next step for the introduce step is you get their name. And I want you to get their name at the beginning, because I want you to use their name throughout the conversation. So if you get it at the beginning, you can do that. So welcome to ABC Law Firm. This is Chris speaking. How can I help you? Yeah, I had a car accident. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. May I ask what your name is? My name is Mary. Well, Mary, I'm so glad that you gave us a call today. And then you'll go to the next step, which you'll see in a moment. But that's step number one, the introduce step with the word welcome. Okay, so let's go to the next step, which is step two, which is the talk step. This step here is where you're going to spend the majority of your time. This is where the prospective client is deciding, do I want to do business with this law firm? Do I like them? And it's all based on the intake specialist. It's not based on your law firm yet. The decision to work with you and to have you be their lawyer has to do with the intake specialist first. They'll get an experience from your law firm later. So it's important to remember that. And so when you think about that, ask yourself, how important do you make the intake department, the call center, the intake specialist in your firm? Do you look at them and view them as critically important? Do you say that they are, but do you act that way? And so that's really important. And that's for another conversation. But a couple of things that you should do is recognize them on a regular basis and customize your recognition to them. Tell them why you're recognizing them. but get other people in the law firm to recognize them too, because if you didn't have intake specialists, you wouldn't have a law firm. There's no need for lawyers. So keep that in mind, but you've got to make them feel special and make them feel as important as they really are. The idea is that you want to hire intake specialists and put them in a career role, if you will, not just, handling calls like we've been doing or customer service. It's a career position. That's the switch that you want to make so that they stay. Okay, so step number 2, this is where you build your relationship. So the first thing that you're going to do after you do the welcome is, I'd like to ask you some questions and see how I can help you. Okay. And so this is what you ask them before you ask them the screening questions. You want to ask permission to ask questions. There's a couple reasons for that. One is it's like a speed bump. It slows down the intake specialist. So they take a lot of phone calls every day, all day long, back to back, possibly outbound phone calls also. And then they get another call. You need them to reset before they get into that call. If they know they're held accountable to ask permission to ask questions before they ask their screening questions, then they'll do it. And by doing that, it's a speed bump. It's slowing them down a little bit so that whatever they've been feeling prior to that call, they can have a few moments to erase it and get rid of it. And look at this. You should write this down now. They will look at the next call as a fresh start. So that's what I want you to write down. Fresh start. It's a fresh start, first and foremost, not for the person they're speaking to, it's for them. It's a fresh start for them. That's critically important. And that's how you can support them. So you have the welcome that we went over. You acknowledge the person for whatever they're calling for. As I said, like a car accident. You provide empathy. And there's a couple things here I'm saying so far that are not in the 5 steps. So you want to be really good at note taking right now. And then you get their name and you use the name in the conversation and you say, Mary, I'd like to ask you some questions to see how I can help you. Okay. And you ask permission. So you have to ask with a question mark and then wait for the answer. And so I already told you now why for the intake specialist, everything is like ×2. So it's also for the person that you're speaking to because they're not expecting it. Remember, they've got all these preconceived notions of how your firm is probably like every other business out there with not the best customer service. And typically other businesses, they don't do a welcome. They don't have a smile. They're not asking for the name and using the name. And they're certainly not asking permission to ask questions before they do. They just kind of bulldoze through and go through a bunch of questions and sound like license and registration, like robotic. So for the prospective client, they're like, you're asking me if it's okay? Great. So it helps with the experience. And step 2, remember, this is where they make the decision if they like you, if they want to do business with you, all because of the intake specialist. So I'd like to ask you some questions to see how I can help you. Okay. Oh yeah, that'd be fine. And so what you're doing is you're asking permission and making a statement of purpose. Then you can see where it says screening questions. That just means now it's time to ask your screening questions. So the screening questions that you've already created for your intake team to ask regarding the different cases that they have. And if you don't have screening questions written up, stop and fix that and write them up. It's not for the intake specialist to figure out what the questions are. It's really like the lawyer, the attorney that would make up the questions because they know what's the minimum amount of questions that they need to have answered in order to qualify if this prospective client goes to the next step. So please don't expect your intake specialist to figure it out because they don't know. And they're not lawyers. And we want them to stay in their lane. And their lane is conversion, not trying to invent all the systems and protocols in your law firm. Okay, so you have your screening questions and then see where it says sing and check in. What this means is you want to teach your intake specialist to sing while they ask screening questions. And what that means is you don't want them to sound like transactional or like license and registration, question, answer. That's what you're trying to avoid. And so if you teach them how to sing, what's going to happen is they're going to change the inflection and the tone in their voice as they ask the questions, and they won't sound like license and registration. So that is singing. And then the last step for number 2 that you want to teach them is how to check in. Because number 2 is we're building that relationship. Decisions are being made. I'm going to work with them or I'm not going to work with them. Sales and techniques are all happening here in step number 2, besides asking the screening questions. So you want to check in with them. It's like a little poke on the shoulder. So teach your intake specialist to periodically say to Mary, you're doing a great job answering my questions. I just have a few questions left. The next question I'm going to ask you might be a difficult question. And I understand that it might be because I need you to explain to me a little bit about the accident. If you need to take a moment, that's okay. Those are examples of check-ins, little love taps and pokes on the shoulder during your screening question process. And that just helps to have a relationship of love, care, and concern, and emotions and empathy all at the same time. Remember, step number 2 is the most important step. Decisions are being made. Okay, next we go to step number 3. So step number 2 is the talk. Step number 1 is the introduce. Step number 3 is acknowledge. Now this is the CTA, the call to action, the conversion, the actual conversion script happens in step number 3. So we've welcomed them, we've done the talk step, we've gotten to know them, they know us, we have all the information we need, we can help them. We've decided we can help them. Mary, based on everything that you said, this is a case that we can help you with. What I'm going to do is right now is I'm going to email you our retainer. I'll check with you to make sure that you received it. I'll give you a moment to initial and sign. I'll stay here with you. I won't leave. I'll be ready to answer your questions. So go ahead. Did you get the retainer? Great. Open it up. Is everything okay? Terrific. Go ahead and follow the instructions there and ask me any questions you want. I'm going to be quiet while you do it. Now, the reason I want you to be quiet while they do it is this is selling. This is the sales presentation. You don't want to speak while they're trying to figure out how to sign this initial. You're there if they have questions, and you can check in with them maybe once or twice, but you don't want to be talking and trying to get other things done because you could lose the sale based on what you say. So you don't want to do that. That's why you want to be quiet. It's a very delicate moment in the relationship. And so they initial, they sign, then you tell them to submit the button, hit the submit button, then you don't hang up. Sometimes I'm listening to call recordings and we hang up and we don't even know if we received it yet. Wait, did you get the retainer? Did you get it? Did you open it? Is everything good to go? So don't assume everything's going to be okay, and don't assume they're going to do it because they're not going to do it. That's why I want you to stay there with them. Ideally, I mean, a lot of retainers I look at, I'll just kind of share this with you. They're several pages. Ideally, 1 page, no more than 2. That's really what you're looking for. And my hope is while you're learning today is your mindset is in a student kind of mindset, a learning mode, which means that you're thinking about all the possibilities, how you can do everything that you're hearing, versus what we tend to do is think about all the reasons why something won't work. So get rid of that one, because if you don't get rid of that one, you're not going to learn anything. Okay, so the reason you want to say based on what you said is because those words and that language is important, because what you're saying to Mary is the decision I'm about to make right now with you that we can help you or we can't help you. It's not something I made up. We're a team here. We're on the same team. It's based on everything that you just said to me. So that's really important to make sure that you use those words based on what you said. And so what step number 3 is doing is it's acknowledgement and recommendation. It's the CTA. It's the call to action. It's where the conversion happens. And if anybody's thinking, you haven't gotten quite the right mindset just yet with today's session, if you're thinking, well, that's going to take too long for us to close on the phone, it doesn't matter. You'll be able to sharpen your axe over time. It'll get less and less and less. The point is you won't have to chase. You won't lose the lead. You can convert them immediately on the spot. You want to do that. You can do it. So just dive in, lean forward, start doing it. Everything will work out. It will be fine. Okay. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is the confirm step. Okay. K for confirm. Why? Because intake, it's an acronym for intake. So the introduce step is IN, and the talk step is T, and the acknowledge step is A. And then when you get to the confirm step, it's K for confirm because it's an acronym for intake. And then the fifth step is execute, which is the E. So you don't need to change the spelling to help me out. Just keep it that way. Okay, so in the confirm step, we just verify all the contact information. Now, most of us have gotten the contact information in step number 2 during the screening question process. That's fine. But before you go, just doubly make sure you got it. Did you get all of it? Is it right? Did you get 2 phone numbers? Is the spelling okay? Just double check. Look at the confirm step as a catch-all. So you definitely want to verify and confirm everything, because the worst thing you could have is not have all the right information, all the accurate information. But you can also look at it as a catch-all. So let's just say the intake specialist, something was missing in the screening question process, or they wanted to clarify something, but they didn't want to do it in the spot. They can do that in the confirm step. They can use that as a catch-all. And so what you're also doing is you're validating the prospective client by confirming all of their contact information. That is the confirm step. Okay, the last step is the execute step, number 5, E, which is the last letter in the word intake for the acronym. Okay, so the execute step is the very end of the conversation. And the reason for the execute step is because otherwise we just say, okay, thank you, and we hang up. We want to give the Ritz-Carlton experience from the beginning of the call to the end of the call. The Ritz-Carlton of law firms, that's what you're looking at. You don't want to sound like a law firm. You want to sound like you're giving an exceptional experience no matter what. And that's the entire call. So what you do is you're all done and say, and because you're really grateful that you have the lead, so you're going to say thank you because you appreciate it. So thank you so much for giving us a call. That's appreciation. That's why the word appreciation is there. Then you go ahead and you say, we look forward to blank. So whatever happened in step number 3 is what would go in there. So let's just say it's somebody that you can help. We look forward to working with you. We look forward to you having an appointment with the attorney at 2 o'clock today. Or if somebody pushes back and they don't want to sign the retainer on the spot, only if they push back and they say that they'll sign it later on, then you would have your intake specialist just pretend that it's 2 o'clock and they sent the retainer and they don't want to sign it right now. Then the intake specialist would be, okay, fine, here's what I'm going to do. It's 2 o'clock. I'll give you a call at 3 o'clock to answer your questions. And then they would confirm the phone number, make sure it's all set. Let's just say the prospective client said that's okay. Then when you get to the execute step, you would just say, okay, so Mrs. Smith, I look forward to speaking to you today at 3 o'clock to review the retainer with you. So basically what I'm trying to give you a couple, 3 examples is what goes in that space is whatever happened in number 3. And what you're doing is you're providing assurance. Okay, you're providing assurance to the prospective client. Okay, so then after that step, you have the verbal contract. This is really important. If you've ever read anything by Dr. Robert Cialdini, The Art of Influence and Persuasion, he talks a lot about the word promise. I suggest you go on YouTube. There's like an hour-and-a-half class that he did on it. I forget the name of the TV station that was interviewing him, but I'm sure that you could find it. And just watch it and get his book too. But here's how you would use this. So let's pretend, let's just use the example of the appointment that was scheduled at 3 o'clock. So in the verbal contract with that example, you'd say, okay, so Mary, now for some reason you need to reschedule that 3 o'clock appointment. Would you just promise to give me a call? Question mark, pause. Wait for the answer. Notice my cadence and my rhythm and how I'm not speaking too fast. This is an important step. I want to know that she got it. And then you rest. After you ask a question, you rest. You be quiet. You don't have to say anything. You've got to wait for the answer. You have to wait for the answer in order for it to be a verbal contract. And then she'll say, yes. Some people will say, I promise. So why the word promise is because most people that promise to do something have a higher likelihood of following through because they promised. And we would rather someone promised that they were going to let us know they need to reschedule versus doing a no-show. That's totally different. And then also when you use the word promise, after you've given this whole Ritz-Carlton experience from top to the very bottom now, they're like, wow, they don't even sound like a law firm. I got to make sure I keep my appointment. I got to make sure I take care of this retainer. I got to make sure I get this signed, because if I don't do it and I'm not that appointment, I probably won't be able to talk to them again. So you're instilling some urgency and some concern in the conversation and some scarcity, because I'm going to give you a bonus statement right now that's not on here. So under the verbal contract for the promise, the scarcity statement would be, that way we can give this time to someone else who's waiting. So you have your verbal contract. If for some reason you need to reschedule the 3 o'clock today, would you just promise to give me a call? Yeah, I'll promise. Okay, great. That way I'll get you rescheduled and we can give that time to someone else who's waiting. And you have your pace and you take it easy and you don't rush. You want to be deliberate. You want them to understand it. Now they're like, holy cow, they must have a line of people behind them and out in the parking lot. And if I don't make this appointment, if I don't sign this and take care of it right now, I probably won't get in there again. So you're instilling concern, urgency, and scarcity, all right there. Okay, and then you have the final hug. All right, well, thank you again for calling. Did I answer all your questions? Is there anything else I can help you with? That's the final hug. And then at the very, very end, it's, oh, and who can we thank for referring you? The reason that's at the end is because that's the right place for it. It's the polite place for it. And what I mean by that is most firms ask that question at the very, very beginning. Now, if they've told you at the beginning, then you don't need to ask it at the bottom. But if they haven't told you, don't ask it at the beginning, because this is really an internally focused question when you ask it at the beginning, which means you're not thinking of the person you're speaking to. You're thinking of you, the business, and the details and the information that you need to get. This is the beginning of the relationship. That's a selfish step. You don't want to be that way. Everything is about them. It's 80% of the phone call is all about them and their emotions. Okay. And that's the way you want to focus on it, not what you need and what you need to get achieved. That's why it's at the end. It's kind of like, oh, by the way, who can we thank for referring you? And the reason for that language, referring you, is because you want to instill in them, okay, they get referrals. I mean, who doesn't want to work with a company that gets referrals? And also, it's kind of saying to them, you're probably going to refer to us too. Now, if somebody says, no, I wasn't referred, it was Google, then you just say, oh, okay, great. Do you remember what the words were that you typed in? And you could just jot that down as a note. And so that is how you would do that. Okay. Now, the big red bow is the very, very, very end. Okay. So, Mary, I just want you to know before we go that you made the right decision calling today. You're not alone, and you don't have to look any further. You made the right decision. People don't know if they're making the right decision. You're not alone. We're with you. We're behind you. Our entire legal team is behind you. And you don't have to look any further. The words and language on the 5 steps, they're deliberate. They're not just like catchy phrases and things like that. They all have meaning. They all have a purpose ×2 for the intake specialist and for the prospective client. But you don't have to look any further. It takes care of what Jay was saying earlier. People, they're searching, whether it's 3 to 5, law firms that they're going to go ahead and call. It's your competition. So you're just kind of putting this language in there to hopefully deter them from reaching out to other firms. Because
that's such a great point, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can convince them that they don't have to look any further, at least 50% of them won't look any further.
Exactly. But you can't just say that. Everything up top has to match with that. So it has to be the Red Bow experience, the Ritz-Carlton experience. It needs to be assumptive language. It needs to be sales language and love, care, and concern and empathy and assurance, all of that. And then what happens is when you do all that at the top, by the time you get here, it's just a done deal. I mean, they're just kind of going along for a walk with you, and it's done. You don't even have to sell anymore. Okay. So those are the 5 steps, and you should definitely just take those 5 steps and immediately listen to this recording and train your team on how to do the 5 steps. It's not a lot. It's all the other things that are above and beyond that, but this is a great way to get started. So what I'm going to do right now, Jay, I'm going to play the call recording. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
So the beauty of this now is we know, Chris's script, this is the master plan. And now she's going to show you someone who hasn't been trained, who's answering the phone, and she's going to make it real and explain where each of the steps should be executed on a call. And by the way, she does this for all of our clients. This is an awesome service. And you should contact Chris after the fact if you think this would be great for your team to have this kind of training.
Okay, so this is a real call, as was mentioned earlier. We have edited out the identification of the firm. So there'll be like pauses and things like that, and sentences not completed, and that's the reason. But you'll definitely get the idea of the firm.
Yeah, it is a little
Or the
funny,
call,
by the way,
rather.
when there's these like blank spaces. There's kind of like a in the background, but it's
Right.
not as loud as it would make it easier for us to understand.
Exactly. Okay.
Chris will explain them. This is where they took the name and the phone number. The name and the phone number have been redacted for privacy issues.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
For calling the
Let me just turn it down. I think it might be a little bit loud. Let's just see.
firm. Please hold and someone will be right with you.
So that's where you would do the welcome. Step number 1 at the very beginning. They have a recording that's coming on right away.
Actually, Chris, I'm going to put a big red flag up, I think I have a flag here somewhere.
Do you?
This was 23 seconds. Like when I listened to the call, of course, when I sent it over to you, it's 23 seconds before a person actually gets on the phone. So super important that you recognize what I said earlier. Like you have to answer calls within 15 seconds. Now, there was an automated attendant, but again, when I always say you don't want to mess with Mother Nature. Okay. And let's face it, in my business, Google is Mother Nature. So if Google's saying answer calls within 15 seconds, I think you want to do everything heavenly possible to make sure that you answer calls within 15 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recommend that we get to where we used to be and we have live receptionists at the very beginning of the relationship. I mean, you're working to answer in 15 seconds. The world, I mean, they just don't want to hear the auto attendants. So if you really want to do the right thing and you really want to get conversion to be exactly where you want, and you're going ahead and you're doing all the marketing, this is part of the same process.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
want
Like
to
how much is one case worth? 10, 20, $30,000? Could an auto attendant versus a real person get you one more case a month? So could you have an extra person answering the phones, an extra receptionist, or an extra person in intake, just so that you always answer within 15 seconds, never miss a call? Would that get you into the top 3 on the LSAs? I believe it would. I believe that investment is worthwhile. Of course, I'm not writing the checks for our law firm clients, but we definitely want to push you in that direction. Anyways, Chris, back to the call.
All right, here we go. And I'll be fast forwarding and pausing and things like that and talking to you.
Well, hello. Hello. Yes. How can I help you? Hi.
So there are the 5 steps, but there's also mindset and other training that you want to do with your team. And at the very beginning of the call, after we have the initial greeting and the initial introduce step, we want to be ready. We don't want to be like, hello, and sounding like we're not really ready for the call. We always want to be ready for the call. And that's what you want to train your team to do.
I was calling to set up a consultation.
Let me just turn it up just a little bit here.
Yes, ma'am. One moment, please. Let me transfer you to my. Hey, can I tell them who's calling? Okay, Miss. What is the nature of your situation?
Our daughter was involved in a car accident. She's in the ICU.
She okay?
No, she isn't. So,
I'm so sorry to hear that.
thank
I'm
you.
so sorry to hear that. Let me transfer you to my. And what is your name?
So it was great that we provided empathy. That's really, really good. And it's not, it's not something that's typical. It's definitely something we all want to improve on. But we did provide empathy, so that's really good. One of the other things that you want to teach your team is how to, read people and be in a state of readiness for however the caller is sounding. You can just tell right from the very beginning that this particular person, she doesn't sound good at all. And so you want to be sensitive to that. When we transfer the call to the intake specialist, that person wants to be sensitive to it also. Okay.
Name again?
So we know where the introduce goes. We talked about that. We are getting the name. Okay. And then the ideal situation is once we get the name, when we transfer the call to the next person, we want to say to that person, so say intake, we want to say to that person, I've got Mary on the phone and she's calling because of X. And then the next person picks up the phone and they can say their name and they can say, is this Mary? Yes, it is. Mary, I understand you're calling about your daughter. I'm so sorry. So just immediately. So everybody just needs to be a little bit organized and speak to the next person and make sure that they know, but it's the details that matter. The details really matter. Okay, so we're still getting to the talk step number 2.
Miss, one moment. Let me transfer you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and you want to have commercials. You want to have commercials. You don't want to have music. You want to be, it's marketing opportunity. Sell your law firm. When people are on hold, whatever the case is, sell your law firm. It's real estate for you to use. Okay, let's just fast forward a little bit.
Good morning, this is Mike.
Hello, I was calling to set up.
So now we've transferred to the intake specialist, and I think that you can agree. Well, we didn't do a trust transfer with saying the name of the person. Well, we probably would have edited it out so you don't know, but I did listen to it before it was edited, and we didn't do that. And saying what the situation was, because we're not acknowledging it. But the other is we don't sound ready. We don't sound ready. We don't sound like we have a big voice and a big smile. Good morning, this is Chris, and I'm an intake specialist. Is this Mary? Mary, I understand that you're calling about your daughter. Is that correct? Okay. And your daughter is in the hospital right now. Okay. I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm going to ask you some questions to see how I can help you. Would that be okay? Yes, it would. And then you go into the screening question process. Okay. But the real point I was trying to make here is we don't sound like we're ready. We don't sound like we love our job. We don't sound like it's the first call of the day. Even if it's 4:45, it doesn't matter. Okay.
A consultation.
Okay. Can I get your name?
Our daughter, yeah,
Now, so let's just say this, somebody is saying, I want a consultation. Let's just talk about that for a second. Fantastic, wonderful. You made the right decision calling our law firm today. I can take care of you. I can help you. So just pay attention to the details. Put your listening ears on. Pay attention to what you're hearing and respond to it. This is about the experience, and experience does equal conversion and sales. But if you don't give the experience, you're not going to get the sale. Okay.
Can you spell your first name for me?
It would be for both my husband and I. My name
Okay.
is, my husband's name is Rick.
That's the awkwardness. We're in step number 2 now.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Okay.
She wasn't driving. She was, wanting to seek some legal advice. She wasn't driving. She was a passenger.
Okay. Tell me tell me a little bit more about the accident. Like, do you know how the accident happened?
So, as I said earlier, I've already listened to the call. We have yet to provide any empathy at this stage, and that should be like the first thing. And I will say that probably one of the biggest challenges that I face working with law firms is empathy. It's everybody understanding what empathy is, but how to use it, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean you have to solve a problem. It's a really big topic, and you want to teach your team, take the time to help them to understand it and role play with them and give them examples, because that's what they're working for you. They're like in school at your law firm. You're teaching them how to perform and how to act and behave at your firm. Okay.
Yeah, I did speak. It happened. And I did speak to the sheriff that was on the scene, that was the deputy sheriff. And he said that the driver lost control of the vehicle.
Now, I just want to give you something to think about, to share with your team, that when the prospective client is sharing about their accident, their incident, their story, they're reliving the trauma of whatever it is, no matter how long ago it was. And they're giving you the details, and in some cases, a lot of details. So what you want to teach your team is to be sensitive to that. Again, the details matter. And say something like, so Mary, I'm going to ask you some questions about the accident. And I understand that this might be difficult. If at any time you need to take a moment, you need to take a break, just let me know. Just set it up that you get it. Humanize the conversation. You get it. You understand. Okay.
And that it flipped several times. But she was the one with the most severe injuries. They had to.
So when she just said if the car flipped several times, the natural step would be, wow, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Yeah, what you want to do is train and teach your team. This will help them with empathy, to visualize what's happening as the accident's being described. They should visualize it. So if they can see it, it will be easier for them to react to it. Okay, it'll be much easier for them to do that. So that's one way that you can help them.
Use the jaws of life to get her out of the car.
So there we are, oh my gosh, which is showing empathy. One of the things that I teach, and you could teach your team, is words matter. So write out 3 empathetic phrases, and each of your team members could do that in their words and in their language that they can call on when they need to. But we did provide some empathy right there.
Yeah. So, I don't know if, well, the officer did say that he he didn't smell like alcohol on, the driver's breath or anything like that. So I think it was just a case of reckless driving.
Okay. He just lost, from what you know, he just lost control of the car?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the other thing that you want to be careful of and why you want to have screening questions written out and train your team how to use them is because if you don't, and if you don't hold them accountable for using them as a tool, they'll invent their own and they'll get out of their lane and it's not their fault. They need to have the right tools and training, and they potentially could ask questions that are more legal, and that they don't need to do that. They don't need to go there. So just take the time to create them the least amount possible to find out if we can help this person or not. Use the name of the person during the conversation. Do you remember when we talked about step number 1, the welcome step, the introduce step, and we talked about getting the name and using the name? We want to use, and in fairness, maybe we were using the name here because it's edited out, but I want to remind you, use the name in the conversation. And then also when the prospective client, or if a prospective client is talking about other people, or calling on somebody else's behalf, however you want to look at it, get the names of everybody and start to use all the names in the conversation to build the story. So now your intake specialist, they have to be really organized, really, really focused. They might need to write it down. So it can be just as confusing as trying to put the puzzle pieces together for whatever the incident was. But we want to do that because we want to humanize the conversation. Okay. We're still in step 2, asking permission to ask questions, screening questions, saying, and check in. Saying right now, I'm not really concerned right this moment about the singing. It's more about the energy level and the feelings of, I like my job, I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm so happy to be talking to you right now because this is really important and you made the right decision.
That's
Do you have
what
an incident report? An accident report of any kind?
No, the deputy said that it would be available since we spoke to
Oh, yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have like the case number? Because we can get that for you. So you don't have to, I
Oh.
don't know if they make y'all pay for them or not, but we can definitely get that for you.
So the other thing that you want to be careful of is intake specialists. Their job is one thing, converting, get the retainer signed on the phone and convert. And I even teach that it's more important to allow them, if they're not quite sure if something should be signed, and I'm not even really talking about this particular call, but if they're not really 100% sure, just let them get it signed. Just let them do it and figure it out after, and then teach them what should have been done differently versus not doing it and potentially losing it. So that's kind of what you want to really focus on and be really, really careful of. But the other thing too is what happens a lot is we allow them to get out of their lane and become paralegal. And that's not what you want. Their job is just convert, just get the retainer signed. Anything after that, the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other pages to the retainer that we don't want them to deal with, that we don't need them to deal with that. We don't need for them to get reports, or that's not what they do. They just convert. Your legal assistants, your paralegals, they take care of everything else. Set them up for success to just convert with the experience.
Do you want the report number? I did get it from the officer.
Oh, yes, please.
If I stuck it to that,
So you can set it up as some heavy lifting that you're doing at your firm. You can say their name and say, these are some other things that we're going to need, but you don't have to worry about it. Leave it with me. I'm going to make sure that we take care of it. We will get it for you. So how can you remove the burden from the person that you're speaking to? And it's important for all of your team members to understand what is the heavy lifting that you do at your firm, the services, the benefits that you actually do. And most law firms don't even talk about it, let alone think about it. Make sure that your intake specialists understand what that is, and they should talk about it during the conversation. Okay, we're still on step 2.
The clock downstairs, my husband is going to get it.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And let me get a good number for you.
That's my phone number, and then you can reach my husband at.
So we're waiting for her husband, so we're just gonna go forward a little bit.
Yeah, getting the details is not the most exciting part of it.
It's not the most exciting part, but remember, step number 2 is the most important step. Anything could happen in that step to make somebody say, forget about it.
And yes. And then for that, and she's like, thank you.
Especially since you weren't present to hear about it. I know.
So her daughter is in a coma in the hospital. Traumatic brain injury.
As a mom, it's definitely hard to get information about something one of your children is doing when they're not even underneath your care. So I definitely feel for you at this moment. How old is?
So everything that was just said right there, yeah, that's empathy, and that's great. One of the things that what you should be doing is listening to the call recordings of your team all the time, monitoring them, coaching them, and guiding them on what to do differently, and always tell them what they're doing right so that they'll keep doing it. But you also want to train them on words matter and less is more. So I know that I'm saying be empathetic, and then we were empathetic, but less is more. You don't need to get too into it, because the more your team says or think they're supposed to say, because they feel like they're in a customer service role and they're supposed to talk, it's dangerous. They can say something that it didn't make any sense. It wasn't the right thing to say. So less is more, which is why you want the 5-step script, and you want your own script of your screening questions in step number 2.
Maybe like a day of rest or something like that before they were responsive, and then like
Hang on one second. So here, I want to make sure I play this part.
information about.
Hang on one second.
And she's like,
Okay. All right, Miss. So we'll definitely be able to help you in this.
So now we're in step 3, okay? Step 3 is acknowledge recommendation step, CTA, call to action, conversion moment. That's what's happening there. Or we're telling somebody that we can't help them. This is where the retainer is getting signed right here as a result of everything that happened in step 2, the talk step, okay? And you could probably tell by now why the talk step is so important. Okay, so right this moment, we would say the person's name, say, based on what you said, blank, blank, blank. This is a case we can help you with. This is a case that we can't help you with. And then you go through the retainer process. So it's right here at this moment.
Situation. First and foremost, I'm very sorry that this has happened to your daughter.
So great with the empathy.
Especially since you weren't present to hear about it. I know as a mom, it's definitely hard to get information about something one of your children is doing when they're not even underneath your care. So I definitely feel for you at this moment. How old is
She's,
so we are gonna have to have her fill out the paperwork.
So if you heard that, we are gonna have to have her fill out the paperwork. So, I mean, we're missing a whole piece of what happened here. Their daughter has a traumatic brain injury and she's in a coma. She can't sign anything. And there's a disconnect with the intake specialist understanding that and recognizing that and focusing and paying attention to the details. So there's the detail part of it. There's I love my job. It's so important to me. I want to get it right part of it. It's the empathy, the real picture part of it. But it's also the disconnect of what your firm really does and what the different cases are that you take and what does that mean? And so the question you want to ask yourselves as the owners and the managing partners and the attorneys, have you done a good job with training your team? Have you done the good job, done your due diligence to make sure that they understand, or did you just make sure that they have customer service, maybe an intake background, and off you go? So that's on you. That's something that you need to take care of. And one of the things I recommend that you do is I would maybe get some videos of all the different types of cases that you handle, like the accident, but showing the terrible part of it, the traumatic brain injury, what happened that made that happen, car accidents, so on and so forth, and have your team watch them and tell them what they are and compared to the cases that you handle so that they can almost live it and see exactly what's happening and get a really better understanding of it. You want to educate them. Okay, so this is where we lose it. This is where we don't get to have the retainer signed.
But that's not a problem at all. We can wait like for her to get a little bit more responsive and then
See, to say when she gets a little more responsive, major disconnect. Don't think for a second that your intake specialists aren't handling calls this way, and it's not their fault. And so do your due diligence and get them trained, but listen to your call recordings. Listen to your call recordings. Listen to your call recordings. I call it RMFD, record, monitor, feedback daily. That's what you want to be doing. Inspect what you expect. And I got to tell you, most of my clients, when they come to me, they say, you won't have any issues with our calls. Mary's been with us for 25 years. John is my nephew, so on and so forth. And every single time, 100%, they're shocked. And then they start to make excuses why that probably happened. Okay. And then some will probably, they just go crazy and they're really angry and they're really upset, which is exactly what I want, because that means they're going to take action. Okay.
Before we have maybe like a day of rest or something like that before we bombard her with paperwork and things like that. With questions.
So you can hear the mum.
I'm sorry, let me just kind of stop you right there. She's had a traumatic injury. So basically she's not able to do anything.
That's very true. We can definitely get a power of attorney to have one of you all.
That's not what we want intake doing. That's legal stuff. They don't need to be doing that. That's not their role. That's not their place. You really need to listen to your call recording and take responsibility for how your team is performing. If you're going to spend any money on marketing at all, you've got to do that. If you don't do that, there are holes in your business leaking.
Maybe even both of y'all handle her affairs. I just don't know if she needs to be responsive so she can sign that up as well. But
I'm sorry, I want to put my head down on the desk.
You and me both.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've listened to this, but
yeah.
So
And by the way, Chris, everything you said is so true. Like for every time a client told me, oh no, we answer the phone, always
Mhm.
immediately. And every time we get the report back from Google and it's like, their average call answering is 27 seconds or something,
Mm.
15 seconds and you're dead, in terms of the algorithm. And same thing, like, oh no, our intake staff is fantastic. They're trained. We listen to the calls, and then they hear a few of these calls and they're like, exactly what you said, so listen to your calls, make sure you're recording, and then call Chris.
Absolutely. Just when you're doing your marketing and you're working with Jay and you're putting together your programs, part of your marketing campaign needs to be, on your list is intake. Do we have the right people? Do we have enough people? We need to get ready. It's like fire. Let's run. Let's get ready for this big campaign because it's going to be wonderful. Our phone's going to be ringing up the hook. Are we ready? Let's get ready. Let's jump through hoops and get ready. Okay, we're almost done with this call.
First is, you know what? Let me talk to the attorney. He hasn't made it into the office just yet.
Less is more. Less is more. We don't need to be saying he hasn't made it into the office yet.
I'm gonna ask about that power of attorney to see that she needs to be aware of, because I know she's only, I know that's a legal age, but like, I don't know if there's seems that she's still y'all's child. I don't know if we actually need that or not. But did you have any questions for me?
No, yeah, just, when you speak to the attorney or have the attorney call us, thank you.
Okay, definitely. I'll definitely have him give you a call as well. So you can, speak to him and get his voice, put like a voice to his name as well.
So that's the end of the call. So this intake specialist doesn't know what to say. That's why he keeps saying things, because he doesn't know what to say. It's a demonstration and us doing a poor job of, I'm not going to say hiring because we don't know that, but a poor job of setting him up to be successful. And this is a case that you lose. You don't get this case, and they're just going to call the next person. Now, we were in, that was step number 3. We didn't, more happened there than normally would because it just kind of got off the rails. Step number 4, confirming and double verifying didn't happen. Step number 5, the execute didn't happen. The big red bow didn't happen. So all of that didn't happen. And you could probably tell when we were done, it's just kind of like, goodbye. And you just had this intimate conversation with someone and we're just kind of like, goodbye. So that's why you have step number 5 and the big red bow.
Now,
Okay,
Chris, I do have some good news.
That's great.
The good news is our client did get the case.
Super.
The better news is the girl did wake up. It was not expected. And
Wow.
thank God for a miracle. She did come out of the
Wow.
coma. And,
Wow.
good news number 3, there's a real case there. And I think the family will be
Beautiful.
getting significant compensation.
Beautiful.
But, and I think good news number 4, they've hired Chris for intake training.
Yeah,
Because
right.
clearly they did
Yeah.
everything possible to not get that case.
Mhm.
And the young gentleman in question, I'm not sure if he's still on the team, but he's getting trained up. Chris, I
Mhm.
don't know if you recognize his name,
Mhm.
but with that, what I'd love to do is open up for some questions. So please feel free to put questions in the Q&A or the chat. And I've myself, I always love to make my own questions, and I get to go first. So
Oh, okay. What do you have?
take your time and format your questions, and please use the Q&A or the chat. So I guess I was just making a note for myself about the 23 seconds to answer the call, and the cost benefit of having an additional live person. I mentioned that earlier.
Mhm.
So the initial person asked for the name twice, and I believe the attorney also asked for the name twice. So clearly that was a fumble. Like they've got to write it down or type it in. There can't be, it just seems like you don't care, right?
Mhm.
Is that Am I
Mhm.
just saying that, or is that absolutely critical?
No, it seems like you don't care. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what's the best practice? Like, are you using an intake screen or just taking notes and entering it later?
No, intake screen. That's what you want to do. Just use your intake screen. Make sure you have the right questions. Integrate the 5 steps because you don't want to be having them on the screen. They got a piece of paper for the 5 steps. Just integrate it in there. Okay.
And the intake screen comes with your legal case manager or your CRM software?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And
Any
this,
that you like better or worse?
well, I will say that the one that I recommend is GrowPath. And the reason
Grow
is because
Cap, CAP,
GrowPath,
Grow Path, PAT.
GrowPath, Grow. Yeah, and I recommend it because they get intake, they're focusing on intake. I've done demos with them and they're good people. So they'll take care of you and you don't have to worry about being serviced. So that's really important to me.
Okay, great. And you had a number of examples or coaching on empathy. So what are some really good examples for empathy? When you hear that the daughter was in an accident, when you hear that she's in a coma with a traumatic brain injury, give us some examples of the type of phrasing that demonstrates empathy.
You could keep it natural. I mean, it's tough answering the question. I can answer it, but it's tough because empathy should come from here. So it's a little bit of a brain twister there, but there is some education on it. So I'll just say, for example, if you felt that you wanted to say, I don't even know what to say to you right now. If you felt that's what you wanted to say, that would be fine. And that would be empathy. You might even say, okay, I need a moment. I just need a moment to just take in what you just said. That would be empathy. Saying the person's name and saying, I am so sorry. I can't even imagine being in that situation. I don't even know how you're able to even talk to me right now. So those are examples of empathy. It's just being with somebody during their pain. What it's not that people think it is trying to solve the problem. And that's not what it is. You don't need to solve anything. You just need to be with them and let them know that you're there. So those are some things that you could say that are okay. You don't have to worry about being too empathetic, if you will.
We got a question really early on in the session.
Mhm.
What if the intake specialist needs to speak with an attorney before he or she can tell the client whether the firm can help the caller? How do you handle this smoothly? And we saw the example where he needed to talk to the attorney for a technicality, but what about just in general?
My first answer is let's fix that. Let's teach the intake specialist to be able to know the difference and make the decision. But separate from that, if that's not possible, then, based on everything that you said, this is a case that we can help you with. But I just want to clear up a couple of things and get some questions answered. Would you mind holding on for a moment? Sure. Okay. I'm going to just talk to the attorney. It might take me a moment. I'm not forgetting you. If it takes a little too long, I'll jump on just so that I didn't forget you. And that's how you do it, and you don't let them off the phone. You do everything that you can to not do a follow-up call. Because the minute you let them loose, there's an emotional gap from the relationship. They're just going to call the competition and go with the competition. So did I answer your question? Is my question back to you?
Absolutely. Question from Karen. What are some of the things you look for in hiring intake professionals?
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics. So not in any special order, but folks that have worked on a farm are great because they are really hard workers. People that work in retail, they understand sales and metrics, and they're on their feet all day long, every day. They are really hard workers. Waiters and waitresses, same thing. Folks that have their parents have their own business, so they were brought up to be in their parents' business, and they watch their parents do that. Perfect. And the big answer is hire for attitude, train for skill. The most important thing that you can do is attitude. Hire for attitude and character. You can train that person just about anything if you have the right training set up, the right onboarding process. So those are some examples right there.
Yeah, I like the expression hire for attitude, train for aptitude.
Yeah,
Rhymes, it rhymes, but it's big words, right?
yeah, there you go.
So question from Annabelle. If the screening's too long, we'll miss other callers. Approximately how long should the process take from hello to thank you?
So let me answer. So one thing is, if you could try to keep your questions to no more than 5, that would be good. And I think if you're asking like how long would an intake call take, that's a different answer for different, for every firm, depending on the calls, their screening questions, the type of calls they're getting, all of that. But I have seen calls go an average of 6 minutes. I don't recommend they go more than 10 to 12 minutes. So you should be able to nail it in that period of time, especially if you keep your screening questions short, which you definitely want to do. And you'll be able to do that when you have the mindset that, okay, intake is conversion. The next step is paralegal. They get all these questions.
Next question from Robert. You used the term LMFD, listen, measure, follow up. What can you explain that? And I missed part of it.
That's my accent for you. So it's R, so record, M, monitor, F, feedback, D, daily, RMFD, record, monitor, feedback daily. That's inspecting what you expect, listen to call recordings. What I really want you to do when you can do it, because I know you might not be able to do it right out of the gate, is be prepared and put in your budget to hire somebody, even part-time, but that's what their job is. They listen to calls and then they give the feedback to the team. They monitor and audit calls on a regular basis.
One of the questions we get all the time is like, we don't want to listen to calls. There's privacy. We don't want to record the calls. Our bar association might not allow the recording of calls. Frankly, that's all gone out the window, because if you want to play in the most important part of Google now, which is those local service ads, the Google screen, right at the top of Google, they're recording every call. And 30 or 40% of the clicks are coming right up there. So what do you say to people who don't want to record the calls and feel there's a privacy issue?
Well, you really should do your due diligence and check the laws for recording calls. I mean, just do that. And if you're not, if you have to give, usually you just have to give like a disclaimer. So it could be automated, or some firms, I like it when things are automated. Now, that doesn't mean I want an automated receptionist, because I don't. But at the very beginning, this call is being recorded. So you can have your team say that, which is not the most efficient, or you can have it recorded that way. But it doesn't make sense to do marketing if you don't have a marketing insurance policy in place. And your marketing insurance policy is monitoring and recording phone calls.
What type of increase in performance and conversions have you seen?
Well, one client, which was a unique situation, had a 70% increase in conversion, but I would say the average is like 25%.
25% increase in conversions.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we spend $10,000 on Google. I'm going to do math in my head, which I shouldn't do. And it costs $100 to get a lead. We're going to get 100 leads. 100 times 100 is 10,000. We're going to get 100 leads. And what's conversion rate? Like 5 or 10%? Let's say 10%. It's easy math.
I would say,
so we're going to sign 10 cases, 100 calls.
Yeah.
And then Chris is saying you can improve it as much as 25 or 30%.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 or 3 cases, just using a ballpark for personal injury, is $10,000 to $30,000 on average when we talk to firms. So 3 cases times 10,000 is $30,000 more revenue, or $90,000 more revenue per month. That's well in excess of $1 million. I mean, the numbers are small, but 30, let's average 20,000 times 12 months. That's $240,000.
Yeah, it's huge. And I'll be honest with you, like if you said to me, hey, Chris, what's the single most important thing I can do? Just one thing you can tell me. And then you gave me that criteria, I would say, record your calls and listen to them and give feedback. If you just did that one thing alone, you will move that needle and you will get to that 25%. That's not even with the expert sales training.
Yeah. I would say get signed up for Google local service ads. Take
Yeah.
advantage of the top of the
Top placement.
Google search. 30 or 40% of your leads are going to come in as phone calls now.
Yeah.
And they're automatically recorded for you.
Yeah.
Last question, because we got about 2 minutes left, from James. How often do you think legal intake specialists should update their knowledge? And should we do monthly trainings with the intake team?
You should do daily huddles with them and weekly sales drills with them where you talk about the numbers, you teach them about the numbers and the math, and they understand the key performance indicators and they understand where they're at as individuals. And then if you have like a formal training with them once a month, where you're educating them on the different marketing campaigns that you're doing, making sure they understand the cases that you're taking, the new cases, that would just be for that part. But then you need to have some training always to help them make sure that they're doing well with the logistics and the technical aspects of their job and the computer and using the computer and everything, because they're not all great at that because we didn't do great at training. So you can't overtrain.
Awesome, Chris. Well, any famous last words?
Record your calls, listen to them, monitor them, and give feedback. Just start today.
What do they say about great presentations? Tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them.
Yeah, right.
So Chris is like,
Do it.
I think I made my point. Like local service ads,
Yeah.
focus on calls, and calls convert better than chats and forums, and get your expertise up on your intake. Make
Mhm.
sure your team has empathy and has closing ability, has sales ability.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Chris, thank you so much for doing this. I
Yeah, my
always enjoy
pleasure.
my time with you. And I'm sure I'll see you soon at a conference.
Yeah.
And this recording will be available at 10goldenrules.com. And feel free to reach out to me, Jay Berkowitz, on all the social media or through 10 Golden Rules, and we'll be happy to connect you with Chris. Thanks again, Chris.
All right. So long, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.